How you fall, 'cause I love you more than you could know, and your heart it grows every time it breaks. I know that it might sound strange, but I wish you paid.
That sounds strange.
Wish you paid.
Yeah. And that, I think this is just like a great example and a great reason to explain and do this podcast. I was struck. I heard this song in the grocery store, actually, and I'd never heard it before. And so I went and I looked it up and I listened to the whole thing, and I was like, wow, what a great example. It's a great, like, it's heart-wrenching, you know, like I wish you pain, because none of us really want to ever see our children suffer. We don't.
Yes.
But at the same point, we look at our own lives, and I recognize my greatest growth has come through suffering.
And this is the contrast, right, between preparing our kids
for life,
and protecting them. And we often talk about moving from protecting innocence to building Christian maturity. And it's like there is this kind of cult, if you will, in our modern world, that there are certain things that we have to be super protective about.
Right.
Other things we just ignore. Right. And there's this fragility that is developed when we protect our kids too much.
Right, exactly.
And that's a danger, and it's a trap that we...
Because, I mean, of course, we're all about protecting kids. Absolutely. I mean, because children have certain... a certain order of development that has to happen.
Right.
And you don't want to expose children to ideas or even like physical hazards too early. You know, you don't just take your toddler and throw them in the pool, right? You know, but at the same time, you also do need to risk and teach them how to handle hard things, whether they're physically hard things, emotionally hard things, even spiritually hard things.
And there's an emotional instinct for moms and dads to just protect our kids.
Yeah.
But is there such a thing as protecting them too much?
Yes.
And and that's what we want to talk about, right?
Right. Exactly.
Where we've gone over the edge, if you will,
right,
in protecting our kids, which actually ends up stifling, hurting, and damaging their growth.
Yeah.
Stifling them in a real way.
Absolutely.
All right. So before we get into that topic, we are in, right? Is this going to be June?
Yeah. Welcome to June.
And June is a great time. Kids, we have graduations. We have all these wonderful things going on. Probably maybe just had a season of first communions that probably happened, right? But you're also school's out, and you're going to be having the kids at home all summer long. Whoa. What are we going to do this summer, right? We want to invite you to join us in the Play and Pray Challenge. That's because we developed this 3-4 years ago, and it's a simple challenge primarily geared towards the summer, geared towards June as you begin your summer with your kids.
And this year, there's lots of time because the Feast of the Sacred Heart is not till June 27th.
So you tip them off if they're not sure what the Play and Pray Challenge is. It has something to do with the Sacred Heart now? Wait, what is this?
Yes. So the Play and Pray Challenge is if you're going to pray with your kids, you need to play with your kids.
There you go.
And so we want you to do 3 things: to do a family fun day with your family, do a date night with your spouse, and consecrate your family to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. So the Play and Pray Challenge then is to do all of 3 of those things in the month of June. And if you go to our website and sign up, you can download a free guide, which gives you ideas for date nights and family fun days. And of course, the enthronement ceremony or the enthronement, preparation.
The preparation
but I think it's
ceremony.
The preparation and the ceremony itself, which
correct.
You can just do at home. It's super, super simple, but very powerful. And so in our family, we actually at our wedding, we did a consecration to the Sacred Heart at our wedding. So this is a very core devotion for us, and we just want to spread it to everybody else.
Well, and not only is it a core devotion for us, I've heard many say this is the devotion of the church, is that it's oriented towards the heart of Jesus. which is his mission, to share that with all of us. And we want Jesus to be the center of our families, period. And so if you go online, you get not only some great resources, great cheap date night ideas, creative date night ideas, things to do with your family. But when you sign up, even if you've done it before and you're going to do it again this year, it lets us know, and it will also add your family's name to masses that will be said. We have a bunch of priests who volunteered to say masses for those who enter into the Play and Pray Challenge. So you'll let us know that, hey, you're doing it again. You'll get some great resources, but also we'll make sure to include you in some special mass intentions from our priests.
And if you give us your address, we can send you a Play and Pray sticker.
Oh, yeah. Little
so we'll send that out, a little booklet, a sticker, and a little commitment card. So take advantage of that.
All right. So what we talked about date nights as part of the Play and Pray Challenge. But, if you want to go to the next level, because we talked about daily connection, date nights, and then we also talk about an annual getaway. We believe that every couple, no matter who you are, where you are, you need to go away on a weekend with your spouse. And so we have set up for us, for you, we've set up getaways for you, and we
not just one, not just two, but 3 getaways.
I know. So we love getting together with couples, and it's been so powerful and fruitful for those couples that come. And we've always ended up having a wait list where there are people who couldn't get on. Right. So we have set up 3.
Or they couldn't get the rooms that they wanted.
Right. So there are 3 very different getaways that we've had, because we want to just say, we want to be for you. Yeah. Wherever you want to go, we want to try to be there. Right. And we've had a number of emails from people, and we just sent out an email blast that said, I can't make this based on the date, but please keep doing them. Right. And that's great. Get on the wait list, hear about them as they come up. So here are our 3 upcoming ones. The first is in Florida, and this is in Fort Lauderdale in September. And it's on a beautiful, beautiful beach resort. But we also have the special team that we've gathered together is Art and Lorraine Bennett, temperaments expert, Father Doug Grandin, who is a convert, a married priest, focused chaplain. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome. And that's a little bit more price accessible because it's within the U.S. Right. Easy to get to. Right. The second one is in the Bahamas. And for those who have traveled with us at other tropical locations, this is going to be a huge home run. We're going to be at a Sandals resort. So it's a high end, think this is you going back on your honeymoon, but even better. Even better. And then the last one is we are going to Austria. We're going to Europe. So the country of Austria. So if you have never been to Europe, if you want to come to Europe, if you are in Europe and you don't want to make it over to the US for a getaway, we are doing one for you in Europe. So that is going to be in Trumau, Austria, at the International Theological Institute, the college there. And we are going to have that. That's going to be a 5-day. It's a little bit longer, especially for those in the U.S. going over. And we are going to have some beautiful times together, but also some amazing excursions that we're going out to a thermal bath spa. We're doing a river cruise. We're doing a tour of Vienna. We're going to castles and nature parks, as well as all of the great regular getaway content that we're going to have for you. So CatholicCouplesGetaway.com. Check them all out if you want to take a look at any of those. All right. So getting back to this. Sorry. So we're talking about the challenges that our world has today with being overly protective. There's a great book that goes into this idea that there is a safety-ism. I love when they talked about this because it's all these isms out there that we're fighting against, and there is a kind of cult or a philosophy ideology of safety-ism that we as parents need to make sure we don't fall prey to it, because our culture can be pushing that idea. I feel like we live in a crisis culture where everything is always a news cycle. It's like, oh my gosh, look at this. Oh, this is dangerous. Oh, this is dangerous. Oh, don't let your kids have this. Don't let your kids have that. And it's like, whoa. It's like people do that for clickbait, for headlines, but it's causing a lot of anxiety in parents. So the book, The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, he goes into a lot of different statistics
and stories and evidence-based research on what is happening in our society and its effect on children.
And why it is the most anxious generation, right? That we're seeing all the statistics pointing to that.
Right. And I think that, and why we are talking about this is because this cult of safety-ism is not good for children.
Right.
It is not good for children. And we are passionate about that because what parents are doing today is they are putting so much emphasis on kids' physical and emotional and even spiritual safety. And we're going to clarify all of these things. But they are, on the flip side, giving their kids unfettered access to the internet and technology, which is where the real danger lies. It's crazy. It's so crazy. So we are not going to be talking really about the technology and all of that because we've done that on other podcasts and the dangers of technology. And you can also read his book, but also look for other podcasts on that as well as our tech guide. But we're going to talk about the flip side, which is being too cautious in the wrong areas. So, and I think that this is so important because I think a lot of really good parents and good Catholic parents can really fall into this.
And it's a trap. And it's alluring because, again, every good trap has truth in it.
Absolutely.
Right?
That's right.
Every lie has a good measure. If it's a good lie, then it has a good measure of truth in it as well. But you only need a little bit of poison to actually to go after rats or whatever.
Because what people are doing is when we say safety, the cult of safety-ism, it is like worshiping safety above all else.
Right. Well, and even a particular kind of safety.
I honestly would say really even good safety, when you put that above everything else.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Even above the development of your child and what's best for your child. I think that there's a real danger there.
Well, let's go through what we mean, because I think that there's an important distinctions between the different types than as you broke it down. Okay.
So first of all, that when we talk about like physical safety, I'll give you an example. We were out at a breakfast. This was a couple years ago. We were at a restaurant and my two boys who are now teenagers were at the time were like, I don't know, maybe 8 and 10 or 8 and 9 or something like that. And the restaurant was taking really, really long. And we were with an older couple and the restaurant, they were taking a long time to get our order over. And the boys were so restless. And we were like in like a little town somewhere. I don't even remember what town we were in. Yeah. And the boys were like,
it wasn't a bustling big city.
No, it was definitely not a city. No. And the boys were like, "Oh, can we go outside?" And I was like, "Okay, we'll just stay on the sidewalk and just stay,
so we know where you are.
So we can see you." And they, just let them walk around, window shop or whatever, but just like on the block. I said, just go back and forth. You can just go right in front. And so they walked away. And this older lady was like, "Why are you letting them do that? What if someone snatched them?" And I was like,
snatch
two
them?
kids, like an 8-year-old and a 9-year-old. I'm like, I don't think anybody's going to be snatching them. They probably run faster than most adults, honestly. But that was her immediate reaction. And I think one of the reasons is that like in the 80s and 90s, that was a big thing. Like it was stranger danger, know.
I was going to do like, there's John Mulaney. Sorry if you don't like him, but he's got some off color stuff too, but street smarts, and it's just like, because there was in this 80s and 90s, this kind of, again,
hyper awareness, I think.
And again, we have, and it taps into a desire of parents to protect our kids, but it exaggerated statistics such to the point that we didn't want our kids to go out our front door.
Or
there was
you didn't
always
want
stranger danger. There was always something around the next corner. And again, not that there aren't issues out there. And of course, as Alicia will remind, we don't want to put caveats on everything. Of course, we're talking about keeping our kids basically safe, and we don't
You're keeping your kids smart.
That's right. But we want to grow. And again, little kids is different than, preteen and teenagers, right? And that's kind of the area we need to think about as we're talking about this.
So, and even in the whole like stranger danger, the reality is that if my kid is lost, I do want them to talk to a stranger. I want them to talk. They're not going to find a policeman. They're more likely to follow. And I've told my kids, if you get lost, this is the kind of person that you look for. Right. You look for them to help you stay in the public. But, like you teach your children that, but it can't be this ultra ultra defensive posture of parents, because then you are terrifying your children.
Yeah, because who wants that? Again, sorry. I'm just thinking of the John Mulaney sketch where he's like, they go through all of this awful statistics and whatever about a child's like, oh, and then have a nice day, go on with your life. And it's like,
It'd be traumatizing.
We don't want our kids to be naive and dumb and so forth. But on the other side, we don't want them thinking there is danger lurking around every person who, offers them kindness.
And we'll explain that in a minute. And so then there's that safety, physical safety, but then there's also emotional safety.
Right.
And that kind of like goes to what Andy Grammer was talking about in the song, is that kids all of us need a certain amount of stress, pain, disappointment, failure to become strong. And we need enough stress that is difficult for us, but that it doesn't break us. And if we try to eliminate every bit of emotional discomfort by being helicopter parents, basically by swooping in and fixing everything, it makes it harder for kids to learn how to handle negative emotions. It makes it harder for them to deal with risk, with conflict, because you're sending them the message, you can't handle this, so I need to handle it for you. And that's the wrong message.
Right. And again, it's like this analogy we've used before, like that there is a problem when parents give too much freedom when they're young and not enough freedom as they grow up, right? And it's like, this is the same thing. We've got to learn that, yes, there is not that you don't always protect your kids on some level, but it's got to be moving pretty quickly to developing this deeper sense of maturity.
Right.
And you can't save them from every pain and loss and suffering that's going to come their way. And we'll talk more about that. Why don't you go to the last
And the
area?
last thing is, and I see this with Catholic parents sometimes, and I just, there's a lot of like, you have to be very careful with this about what is age appropriate, but you have to remember that your kids eventually, at the appropriate times, they need to be exposed to secular ideas. They need to know that bad things happen. And especially when they're teenagers, they need to be in situations, they need to learn how to handle themselves in situations with people who don't share their values, with people who are living lifestyles that are different than them, but doing it in an appropriate, supportive way. And so,
with courage and charity, right?
With courage and charity, exactly. And you have to be really careful, like all of these things, about doing this age appropriately, protecting them while also growing Christian maturity. Like all safety-ism, I mean, there's some truth here, but you cannot, if your 18-year-old has never been challenged in their faith, has never lived a life outside of the bubble that is your home, if they've never come in contact with anyone who thinks differently than they do, they're going to have a really hard time being an adult in this world. And
an analogy is this story I heard about a naturalist who was watching all these butterflies come out of their cocoons.
Right.
And as all of these butterflies were coming out, he saw one that was struggling to get out.
Yeah.
And so he took like a little, what do they call those? Like an X-Acto, like little razor, and kind of made just the littlest of nicks in that cocoon to make it easier for that butterfly to emerge. Well, it worked. The butterfly came out. But as it turns out, the butterfly was fat and his wings were short. And he couldn't fly, couldn't get off the ground. And it became quick prey for the birds and was gobbled up and gone. And he said, maybe I shouldn't have done that. And because the butterfly needed the suffering, the pain, the struggle of pushing through to slim out the body and build out the wings so that it could fulfill its purpose. And again, we're not saying to seek out and put your kids in the path of danger per se. However, our life, this mortal coil, it provides us with, and our kids, plenty of opportunities to struggle, to grow. And we can't be in that position where we think, whether it be helicopter parents or drone parents, clearing the way in front of our kids, because our kids need that for growth. Again, I think we're primarily, we'll talk about different ages, I guess, but again, thinking more about that pre-adolescent to adolescent time is that they've got to see these things in a real way to grow. And even on the younger end, on some level, there is something there. And I'll just say this too, is that moms and dads have different roles in
so true.
the growth and the development. And
you have to be on the same page.
Yes.
But you have different roles.
And one can be too much in one direction or the other.
Right. Sure.
But in general, men are more risk. One of the things that they help give their kids is an ability to take risks. Now, that's not 100%. Plenty come from mom as well as dad. But there is a unique value that is shared with the kids, and both boys and girls, that need to take risks because we all need it. And there are times where we have found ourselves on the other side of like, oh, I don't know if we should do that. Oh, yes, we should. And as a first parent, like when we had kids in the beginning, we wouldn't let their little pacifier fall to the ground.
Yeah, we were much more risk adverse.
Yeah, and because we want to swoop in and we want to protect them, and they're so precious to us.
Well, we're afraid of, we don't know how strong they are.
We don't know how strong, and we don't want to screw it up. We want to do our job right. So
now we're not afraid of screwing it up, and we know kids are pretty strong.
Well, kids, and we've only learned that really through time.
Absolutely.
We have heard it, we've read it, but even learning it is very different.
Experience is the best teacher.
And so again, that's the analogy. I think that it's like, okay, on the simplest level, your first kid, you're boiling that pacifier, you're making everything clean and sanitary, and then by the fourth kid, you're like, it's fine. Here you go.
Right.
Anyway, all right. So
let's just talk about for a minute. We're going to go through each of those three areas and just kind of talk about what does that look like? What are the pitfalls? And just give you some examples, lots of examples. We have so many examples from our own life. And one of the things that I just want to start with in talking about Jonathan Haidt in the book, The Anxious Generation.
Yeah, this is a fascinating concept.
Yeah. He talks about parents who are in kids needing to be, or human beings, human beings in general, and anthropologically, there is discover mode and what he calls defend mode.
Right.
Okay. So we have both of those modes as human beings.
And we need them both.
We need them both. So discover mode, what do we mean by discover mode? Discover mode is during times of peace or abundance and safety. And you're in discover mode when you are you're not afraid of being killed or anything. You're not afraid for physical safety, but that's not time to explore, to look for new things, to be creative. It's a positive, happy way of approaching life. And what I always think about is like during like the Pax Romana, when there was relative peace in the ancient world, that's when arts and culture and literature flourished during that time because people weren't afraid because the Romans had kept good peace. And so people in general at that, the ancient world weren't afraid of being killed at every moment. And that's when Christ came and God uses everything, right? But we as human beings, it's a good point for human beings. We need relative peace if we're going to have times to explore and be happy and to flourish. And that's basically should be, quite honestly, most of childhood.
Yeah. When I do my dad's course, we talk about that development of boyhood, and it's oriented towards wonder. It's towards exploration, right? And they have to have the freedom to know that my world is safe, and my world is safe because of my parents and my proximity to my parents and the environment that they allow me to be in. And there is something healthy and good about that. And it's not restricted only to that age group, right? But that's where it's predominant in that time frame. They need to have that beautiful exploration.
Right. And I think that you just touched on there, the attachment to parents. That's what makes kids stay in that discover mode when they know that they have a parent who is providing boundaries, who is providing safety, and that the parent is calm and peaceful. And also in discover mode, the parent isn't stressed out or on high alert all the time because kids pick that up.
And so here's the contrast then, right?
Right. The contrast to that
is the defend mode, right? So this is when you're in mode where you're detecting threats. It's concerned about your protection, your safety. It does have elevated stress levels and hormones that are protective that are activated, right? But it's always looking at the threats and protecting yourself and others in that space. People with chronic anxiety, they are in this mode all the time, right? They're constantly worried.
The adrenaline's always pumping.
They're always looking out. And it's like when you're in a military zone, you want this to be operative, to keep you alive. And there are times and seasons where you need to have this in place. But if you are living in that space on a regular basis, your stress level, your anxiety level is inhibiting not only you, all those around you. Because something that I think is so powerful is that for a little child, for a baby, the way they are soothed is by the comfort of their mother. Primarily, right? Is that 0 to 3 years or something like that, or at least in the first 6 months?
Emotional regulation,
Their emotional regulation is almost entirely dependent upon mom. And so, dad, your job is to make sure mom is peaceful. Mom, your job is to remain peaceful, to care for that child.
Right.
And as your kids grow, yes, they have a longer tether. They are farther away from purely being measured by your emotional regulation.
They learn to regulate their own emotions.
And they ought to. But they still pick up a lot of what we're doing. So if we're in hyper tense mode, like I'll give you an example. We went to Disney World, right? And if our kids were older, so I was a little bit more peaceful, knowing their maturity, but there were crowds where I was always looking for our youngest. And I was like, okay, I know where she is, because there was a fun, there was a joy, there was a discovery, but there was always this back of my mind, just because you're in an unknown place with tons of people and all of that, right? And so there's this measure of defend mode that we need to be cognizant of, so that we don't pass that on to our kids, and recognize that we can't create an environment for them where they're always in that defend mode.
Because these people who are in discover mode are then become more curious as adults. They are happier. They're more sociable. They're more open to new relationships. They're open to new experiences. They're actually eager for new experiences.
Right.
These are confident adults when they have a childhood that can actually be a childhood, right?
Yes.
That discover mode. But if you have parents who are constantly in defend mode, and then you have children who are constantly in that defend mode, this is when you get the anxious generation. This is when you have people who see every new situation is a threat. Everything. It's a huge obstacle to learning. You have kids who are not curious, who are instead worried about, oh no, I have to put up blocks everywhere. I don't want to do anything new. I don't want to do anything different. And that is a real problem. So we as parents have to make sure that we are calm and peaceful, and we have appropriate boundaries, because we want boundaries that stretch our children without breaking them. Yeah. Okay, so we have to figure out, and this is why parenting is an art, guys. Yeah. Like, it's not, we can't tell you at this age, at this time, do this, because all of our kids are different. But we can give broad parameters for planes of development, which we talk about all the time, right? But to recognize that we have to basically be able to send that message to our kids. You can do this.
Right.
You can do this when you know your children, when you know your child well enough to say, you know what, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. But that takes a careful, observant parent who knows their child and who is familiar with the situation. But even if you don't think your kid can do it, it's still, hey, there's chances are high that Vikings are not invading at the moment, and your child's physical, like, you don't need to rush them away. Yeah. So it's like, stay calm. Yeah, it's okay.
One of the reasons we wanted to move, and one of the things that we were looking for in a new house is a place for our kids to explore. So when our kids were young, that they could, our bottom 5 basically grew up in this house, and that created a safe space that we could put parameters on, appropriate for them to have backyard fun, have friends over, and be like, I'm okay. Yeah, you might skin your knee. You might do this, you might do that, but I know that you're here. And then as you're older, the neighborhood becomes more of a wider playground, if you will, for you, and schools and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, as parents, we need to create that strong connection, that bond, that they are secure in us, both in their identity and belonging with us, but in the environment we've set up. And
good.
I love you. You had ordered this book. We haven't read it yet, but the the gardener and the carpenter. I got the right order, right? And we want parents to be the gardener. And the idea being in this book is that too many modern parents think that they're carpenters and that they want to take precise measurements, get the right tools. And if they do X, Y, and Z
Right.
with their kids, they will have the expected outcome. And that's just not reality, right? We are a Christ-centered, a Christian parent is more of a gardener, recognizing that this child, yes, I plant seeds. Yes, I till the soil, create the environment. And I may have to do pruning with that tree and that plant, right? But I cannot control the growth or the outcome.
Right.
And that's
It's God. We leave the growing to God.
growing is in God's time and God's way. And so as we as parents look at this environment of discovery and defend, having that mode of being the gardener, setting up that environment, yes, planting seed, yes, tilling the soil, yes, even pruning, and working
Giving
on them.
support as needed.
Yeah, absolutely. And but then we know that the growth is in the hands, in some ways, in the child and God. But we are super intentional about our role, our part in that, without holding back. Because some plants only grow through the hardiness and survive, and they become even more fruitful, right?
Absolutely.
And so we are looking at the whole idea that we're always the parents of our kids, but particularly in that preteen and teen years, we want to transition to both giving them more freedom, and we end up being more of the coach and counselor and somebody who is the
Mentor.
guide and mentor to them. Again, you're always their parent, but you're allowing that freedom and that risk to be handed more to their hands, giving them, and really the way that they have that freedom is they had a childhood that was full of discovery, that was full of exploration. It was full of maybe making little falling, skinning their knee and falling out of the tree or whatever, right? So that they had greater strength when there were bigger things that came their way, that gave them strength to go there.
Okay, so let's just talk about, we're going to talk about these 3 different areas, and we'll go through each one, just because I thought it would be easiest to just do it this way. Okay, so first let's talk about physical safety, because children we are one person, and so areas of physical safety, even you think, well, I'm going to make them emotionally strong, but I'm just going to be overly concerned about their physical safety. It doesn't work like that, because your child is one person. They're going to get that message either way. So even just thinking about kids like immune systems. I mean, I remember when I was a young mom, when I had like all kids like under 6, there's always somebody sick.
Yeah.
And then I remember there was one friend, I can't remember who it was, but it's probably happened more than once, who was like, oh, well, they were going to come over for a play date. And I would usually just out of courtesy, just say, hey, just so you know, this kid has a runny nose. Oh, well, then we won't be able to come over. Well, it's kind of like, I'm not saying my child is throwing up or they're like hacking up, like green mucus or something. What I'm saying is that they just have a runny nose right now. And if you're not going to come over, if somebody has a runny nose, then basically you're never going to come over, because there's always going to be somebody sick.
And with our kids, it was guaranteed you one of them.
Absolutely. Somebody was always sick. And so we have to recognize that, okay, yes, you can't be stupid. Like if you truly have somebody who is like a raging fever, sure, people shouldn't come over. But if it's that like lingering cough, lingering runny nose, all of that, you have to trust your child's immune system. They have an immune system, and exposure to germs and dirt, guys, that is how adults become healthy. Because the more you are exposed to dirt and germs as a child, the less you are going to be sick as an adult.
Our most healthy child, actually, and I won't mention who it was, ate dirt. Okay. I was shocked. I don't know. I didn't think kids would do that.
Yes.
It was sand, I think, from a sandbox.
Oh, dirt, so many things. Dirt, sand, charcoal briquettes, name it.
And I'm like,
they ate it.
What are you doing?
Yes,
and we did find some of it coming out later in the diaper, but and we did, we don't like leave them completely abandoned, but they were exposed to things that they are now healthier for, because of the group immunization, if you will, that they received.
And I think that, especially after COVID, when everybody just went crazy over all of this, it just drove me crazy because, see, I don't want my kids to never get sick. Okay. Do not try to keep your child from ever getting sick. I'm sorry, but that's first of all, it's just an act of frustration because it's not going to happen. They're going to get sick. But second of all, what do you want to do? You want to make them strong. You want them to be strong. You want them to eat healthy food, to limit sugar, to drink enough water, to, have a variety of fruits and vegetables so they have their vitamins. All of those things, that is what's going to really protect your child.
That's right.
Those are the things. Have them have enough exercise, running around. And then when they come in contact with those germs and they do get sick, because all kids get sick, they will be able to fight it off and they'll be stronger in the future. I'm telling you, we have raised some of the most healthy adults you are ever going to meet. I mean, because there's just lots of germs around.
Yeah.
And I would say the same for my brothers and sisters coming from a large family of 10. Right now, we are very, very, in general, healthy people.
Because you guys are exposed to a lot of crazy stuff.
Exactly.
All right. So after immunization is this idea, unless there's anything
immune
else.
system.
The immune system. Sorry. Yeah.
We're not touching immunizations. Not going there, people. Sorry. That's other podcasts.
But is this idea of free play, meaning just unorganized, out and running around. And with that will come bumps and bruises.
Right.
And what we want to do is have bruises, not scars.
Right.
And the simple idea, we talked about backyard play,
but even sometimes a few scars are okay. I have a couple scars from my childhood.
I mean, those are good stories. I remember I've got stories. I can tell you.
Yeah, you definitely have scars. Yeah, but not crazy.
but we're talking again about the physical safety where you've mentioned this in a podcast when we talk about technology, not wanting our son to climb up a tree. It would be easier for him to go inside and play a video game, but you let him climb the tree because it was important. And we've had kids who have fallen, right? We've had kids who have fallen off their bikes and scraped their knees and come in crying. And we've had to go to the emergency room. And
we've had kids fall out of trees. Yeah.
And it's just like, and what was funny with that,
when one of our daughters fell out of a tree, and that's when I realized this is why climbing trees is actually safer than climbing other things, because she kind of hit the branches on the way down and it broke her fall. And she
which sounds awful, but it wasn't that tall, but it was still funny.
But she was able, she did okay.
Yeah,
she was okay. Yeah. She didn't break any bones.
But kids need this kind of play. They want it, they desire it. And without it, they do miss out. They are deformed in some way if they don't have this kind of free play. Where again, like all of life, it's like you want them to learn how to take risks on this level, on small things.
That's right.
So that they have greater confidence as other risks are approached. They'll be smarter, like, okay.
They have better risk assessment.
I'm sorry. Yeah. It's not just that they're willing to take more risk. It's that they're better able to discern this is a risk worth taking and this is a risk not worth taking.
Right.
And if you don't expose your kids to some level of that kind of free play, allowing them to take some of those smaller risks when they're a kid, later on, they'll be afraid. Mm-hmm. They'll be afraid. They'll be out of pace, not just with their peers, but where they should be developmentally.
Or they will take risks that are inappropriate.
Yeah, and they won't be able to discern and assess that properly.
I mean, a great example is like jumping off of high things. Okay, I literally remember as a child jumping off of a playground or something. And it like you getting that like shocks like up your feet,
Yes.
and thinking to myself, okay, that was too high, or learning how to like jump down and like bend your knees, to cushion the fall. And like, I think it was another kid that told me that, but because I did that as a 7 or 8-year-old, when I was a teenager, I'm a lot better able, and I'm like out with friends somewhere, I'm a lot able to say, yeah, I know I could jump off this, or now that's too high or whatever. Right. But when you have kids who never had that experience or never outdoors, that's how kids really wind up, teenagers wind up taking inappropriate risks.
That's right.
And truly hurting themselves.
Because there needs to be, and I'll say this, particularly for boys, there needs to be a good risk assessment along with confidence. Because
before they become adolescents.
Because when they're adolescents is when their confidence will oftentimes shoot through the roof. That will exceed their ability, right? Their confidence will be beyond their if and you need them to have some level of risk assessment. It may not save them from everything, but at least we'll say, maybe not.
So you're going to have, if they don't have those appropriate risks when they're a certain age, when they become adolescents, they're going to be on either end of the spectrum.
Right.
Inappropriate risk assessment, make it too high or too low. One thing I want to say about the appropriate risks and children and that risky kind of free play.
Yeah.
When we say free play, what we mean is free of adults.
Important. That's right.
All right, let's be honest. It's free of adults.
It's not organized. It's
not
mom supervised and monitored.
It's not
se.
Mom is sitting on the bench in the playground and watching the kids play. No, it's mom is not there. The kids are at the playground by themselves. The kids are in the woods
or she's
by themselves.
If they're younger, she's
right. Guys, just interpret all of the things. We're not talking about a 6-year-old going to a public playground by themselves. I'm talking about a 12-year-old should go. A 10-year-old should be able to walk to a playground by themselves in a neighborhood that you're aware of and play. Like you as a parent should be able to assess that risk and be like, they'll be fine. Our caveat was always, you have to be with somebody else. You always had to be with somebody because if they did get hurt, you have to have somebody else to go get help. Right. I mean, that's what I always thought anyway.
Right.
But the thing is that they have to be able to take those risks without adults being around so they can truly be free to learn, because they have to learn how to handle bruised legs and bruised egos without an adult to swoop in and be like, oh, are you okay? Are you okay? No, when they're at a certain age, when they are 8 and up, they have to be able to do that. They have to be able to learn how to play fair, not because an adult says, oh, this is what's fair, but because you learn on the playground.
Yeah.
You just learn. If I keep breaking the rules, no one will play with me.
Right.
I remember being on the playground and learning those kinds of lessons. If I break the rules, I'm going to be picked last for the team. If I don't do my best, if I don't play my hardest, then there's an appropriate social consequence. And that's really the best way to learn, not because an adult says so.
And as your kids get older and they're playing on their own, these are risks they will seek out. They will seek out things that have higher speeds, going down, whether it be sledding or whether it be bikes or whether it just be running or swinging or whatever. They'll seek out heights. They'll seek out and for me as a kid, I combine both of those somehow, and then I'll add this one. The next one is dangerous tools. And I, as a boy, created a rope swing from my tree, from a very large tree. And so there was high speed, height, and a dangerous tool. I thought I could be a pirate and swing on this rope with a knife in my hand. It was the stupidest decision.
Right.
But it had it's what we seek out. And you know what? I not only remember it actually taught me a ton about my ability and how I needed still my mom to fix the hand.
He wound up cutting his hand open.
And how to go to the ER and all that. But
so some people would look at that and be like, see, that's why your mom should have known that you were playing with that knife so you wouldn't do that. No. It was good that you had that experience. Not that your mom handed you the knife.
Right. She didn't seek it out. She didn't, but she knew.
She allowed the space for it to happen because children will take the risks when they're ready.
Because I knew I had freedom.
Right.
And that freedom was actually a confidence builder for me, which is what
what did you learn from that?
I learned my limits. I learned, okay,
don't swing on a rope with the knife.
And I'm like, but the other parts were awesome.
Yeah.
And I learned, okay, even though I did this, I survived. I had a recovery time and I wore bandages for a while and all these different things and stitches and whatnot, but I could survive that. Even that thing that was very painful. And it was a blow to my ego that I couldn't be the pirate I thought I was going to be, or that my Army medical kit couldn't bandage up what I'd done.
You actually needed stitches from a doctor.
Needed my mom and stitches. Anyway, but it actually left me with a mark of being a little bit stronger, a little bit wiser of what was an appropriate risk and what wasn't. Right. And I didn't do that again.
Right.
And again, when you make those smaller mistakes as a kid, when you're 8, 10, 12 years old, your kids, they in general can't make those really big mistakes if you're in the right environment. And that's what we allow.
So the other three things, this is from a study that was found that what are the risks that kids seek out when they're alone? And when we say kids, again, we're usually talking about like
Preteen,
elementary schools, preteen kids. The other three are dangerous elements like water and fire, right? There's two things that kids love. They love to mess around with. Both of those things can kill you, Both of those things are dangerous and need rules, but kids seek them out. And then also roughhousing. We see this with boys a lot more than girls, but
I know.
The wrestling, the boxing,
King of the Mountain. Do
that.
Kids still play that?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, we talked about this. This is the stupidest game. Little girls.
Game.
This is the difference between boys and girls. Girls do not play King of the Mountain. Girls are like, yeah, we're too smart for King of the Mountain.
Well, but girls, again, this is sidetrack for a second, but girls are thinking about the group, the community.
True.
Where boys are thinking about hierarchy.
Yeah, that's right. And then the third thing is disappearing. What is disappearing? It means, think about it. Kids play hide and seek. Kids wander away. Kids, go exploring.
Right.
That's separation from their parents.
That's what they do. That's the risky behavior.
Yeah. And that is good. And this is how kids learn to manage their bodies in the physical world. It's if children don't have the opportunity to take these risks in appropriate ways, they won't know how to manage their own bodies or the bodies of other people. Okay. And that's where the roughhousing and all of that comes in. And these are good things for us as parents to recognize. And this is one of the reasons that we are big fans of athletics.
Sports,
for all kids when in high school, but especially for boys, because there is something about learning the strength of your body and how to interact with other people that gives you more confidence as a person. And even for a girl, girls need to learn also how to be daring and how to take those risks and how to push themselves.
That's so true.
That is a great, beautiful thing about athletics, about theater, about arts, all of these things. It's not even just sports, but all of these things where you learn how to manage your body, your talents, how to work with other people. But all of those things, even in the arts, provide opportunity for risk, and you need to allow that.
All right, and then another kind of risk is taking on the world, going out into the world, right? We're not talking about sending your kid down that dark alley, but maybe they can go to the grocery store, right?
Right.
And so recently I was out and I had to run to a home improvement store, and next to it or close to it was Walmart, and our youngest, who is 12 years old, sent her with a card with a list to Walmart,
shopping,
right?
yeah.
Do shopping. And you know what? What did she do? Was she texting you or something? Or
So our daughter was in Walmart, and I had a list of things that I was like, well, if you're going to Walmart, can you pick up these things for me? Here's my debit card. And so she picked up what I needed her to get, and then she went to the clearance section and found like cups with straws, like for our grandkids. And she's texting me a picture, and she's like, hey, do you want me to get these? I was like, yeah, that's a great deal. Like, do it. I'm like, you're an amazing shopper.
It's so funny.
And I could hear her walking through going, oh, excuse me. Yeah, sorry about that. And I'm sure people were like, who is this kid who is shopping by herself?
And if you think about this, for her, and then later, I actually didn't want to go into the next store, so I sent her in to get something else. But anyway, and so this is a lazy approach to parenting.
Yeah.
But also, this was built over years, right? When we're at a restaurant or we're out in public, having them ask questions so that it's not just us. It's a little risk for them, but encouraging that. We're creating an environment where they can,
talk to adults, talk to strangers.
Hey, Dad, can we get soda? Well, why don't you ask that person over there if they know where the soda is, or ice cream or whatever it was. And those little investments, those little opportunities where they had to take those risks to learn how to engage in the world. So later on, they could be on their own.
Right.
They could have a level of confidence. I don't want to ever raise a child who the first time they're making their life, like going out to the store, going to ask someone out or what, is that they're off on college all by themselves where they don't even have us to come back to.
Right.
And that we can't be aware of how they're interacting.
Right.
I remember we were just celebrating one of our daughter's birthdays and they, in our family group text, they shared a picture of her riding her bike. That's like the quintessential memory I have of Maggie. And she's on her little bike and she would ride in our neighborhood, on the streets. You know what? And I don't think any one of our kids hasn't fallen off their bike and skinned their knee, or, crashed into something, nothing major, but there was a risk, but there was a freedom that.
But it's more than the physical risk. What this is also about
built their
being
confidence.
Engaging with the world.
That's right.
And being able to explore, being able to ride where mom and dad don't necessarily know where you are every second.
That's right.
And they can just go around. There was a store, there was a little shop in our old house where it was always like a rite of passage, when they got to be a certain age, when they were like 7, 8 years old, they could walk over to the store and get milk, or they would buy a soda or, whatever. We allow our 12-year-old, our 14-year-old to go to the YMCA,
to work out,
to play basketball, right? They have their own cards. They can walk over there after school, check in. This is our community. This is our neighborhood. Right. I know that's a safe place for them to go. There was a pop-up fair, like a carnival. that comes like every May. Our preteens wanted to go. Okay. Again, this is our community. We're familiar with it. I knew that there would probably be people that they knew. They had each other. They were with friends. Yeah. Could they fall off a ride? Yeah, probably. I'm like, but what is the greater risk? The greater risk is that they don't have confidence in life.
And they don't grow and they don't mature.
And they don't grow and mature. I would much rather take a physical safety risk than risk having a person who lets life pass them by because they're afraid of everything. Last year, our 17-year-old, was he 17 at the time? Yeah, he was 17-year-old. He drove down to Florida with a friend. 2 17-year-olds drove from Ohio to Florida. It was a 10, 12-hour trip.
They had a trusty car.
They took our minivan. I was like, that's the safety boundary. That's the safety boundary, is that I want you to take my car because I know my car is safe. And
GPS tracking. We knew where they were.
Exactly. I could
talk through all the steps of what happens when they do this.
And they did great. But that is an important experience for him to have. And what a confidence builder for a young man. My parents trust me to drive 12 hours, down the East Coast.
And I as a good dad, we were concerned, we checked in, but I actually had confidence in him. Yeah. I've taught him how to change tires. I've taught him how to, the basic care of car overview.
We have AAA.
And he knew what to do.
Yeah.
And it's just like the opportunities. Like I know he is far more confident today than he's ever been. And it's moments like that really invested in him because doing hard things with that level of support, and it gives a child a gift that is going to live with them for the rest of their life. That level of confidence, not just because of we said it, but that they did it. They conquered something. They went out. They stretched themselves. Yeah. And that is what we're after in making sure that our kids understand that. And again, when they're young, maybe your boundaries and the support might be close and more proximate to them. But as that continues,
you have to expand.
It has to keep growing because you want the world to be their oyster. You want them to be able to go out and enjoy. And we use that perfect analogy of teaching a kid to swim. That early on you keep them close, but the goal isn't that you're always watching them. It's that they're at the ocean by them, with their friends, and they're enjoying themselves and they're safe because they've figured out a right level of risk.
Really, by the time our kids are 16 or 17, they should be doing almost everything that we as adults do. As far as driving, as far as managing money, even, obviously they're not paying their mortgage, but they have their own paycheck. They are talking with adults. They are running their own lives around the age of 16, 17, because adulthood is right around the corner.
We want to have that last 2 years before college where they're really being tuned up and ready to go out. We're not throwing them in the deep end. Well, no, we are throwing them in the deep end. They want to go.
But when I say the goal is 16, that means that freedom begins coming way before 16. Right. It happens 10, little by 12, by little before that. Right. Okay. This is actually probably going to go a little bit long, but y'all just like... all
right. We're okay?
Yeah. Well, we're at 45 minutes or so now. So. No, but I think that's okay. Y'all you can stop this if you need a break and come back to it. Okay, so let's talk about emotional safety, because I think this is actually a really big one too. It probably won't take as long as the other ones. But all right, so kids' frustrations. We don't want to push our kids or punish them so hard that they break, but we do want them to experience as consequences and difficulties at home. I need to be okay knowing that I'm going to say something that my son or my daughter is going to be really mad at me for. You know what? I'm going to have to be okay with that.
And you're going to put your big girl pants on and say,
That's absolutely
okay.
right.
I'm not here to be your best friend.
Right.
I'm your mom.
Right.
I'm your dad. You know?
And like, the other day I had a child who was speaking to me very rudely over and over and over again. And I knew that I could not allow them to go out to the event that they wanted to go to. And I was thinking, I'm going to tell them this and they're going to be really mad. But you know what? I have to do that. And they are going to be disappointed and they're going to be angry and they're going to experience frustration. But I have to be okay with that because I'm confident that they will be able to handle their emotions. And I would rather give them that experience of frustration and being angry at me than being angry at another authority figure some other time in their life.
Because too many parents are concerned. And I get it. Nobody wants drama in their life. And sometimes you're just tired or whatever. But we can't, as parents, abdicate our role and kind of tiptoe around the big emotions of our kids. Now, again, we have a whole podcast talking about how to deal with that. But again, this idea of emotional safety, that you're somehow putting bubble wrap around your kids emotionally so as to protect yourself from their big emotions by not correcting them or by not intervening or not providing what consequences you had actually already talked about.
Yeah.
Because we want to have, I remember just thinking back to that podcast we did with the Westers about we want high expectations and high support for our kids. That doesn't mean the high support doesn't mean we're doing it. It means that we're ready to support them.
Right.
But we still have high expectations of them. Right. We want them to act virtuously. We want them to act with charity and kindness and respect and all of that. And we give them the support to do that.
And I think the support is us keeping ourselves in check.
That's true. That's true.
Another area of frustration and all of that is dealing with, and we kind of alluded to this already, in dealing with like strangers in the store, whatever. But also I think that this goes to dealing with teachers or coaches or adults in their lives in an appropriate way.
Yes.
So for example, again, caveats, I don't allow my children, and I have removed my children from situations where I felt that there were adults that were emotionally out of control.
Yeah.
But I do allow them to be around adults who make mistakes, because adults make mistakes. Okay.
Right.
There are some adults who make mistakes.
Not every
who
teacher
say
gets
things,
it right on the first time. Right?
They don't all get it right on the first time. But when you have adults who clearly are emotionally unbalanced, my kids are not going to be around that person.
That's right.
But hey, have there been teachers who have said and done things that I disagree with? Sure. But I know that's a safe person.
But our first reaction is to have our child be even at a young age, talk to your teacher about why you didn't get this grade. Right. Again, we're not talking about kindergarten. We're talking about kids who can actually do this. Go to the teacher and say, I'm sorry, I don't understand why I got this low grade.
Or why I got a demerit.
Yeah, or whatever the situation might be.
Right.
Because there is and then when kids, because we only hear about it on the complaining side. Well, I can't believe they said that. I really wasn't doing blah, blah. Okay, great. Then talk to them tomorrow.
That's right.
And if our kids got a demerit or got a punishment for something from school, we ask them to either apologize or have a conversation with that teacher, that individual, so that they can get a feedback on what happened and what they can do differently.
Right.
And when we empower our kids, not every child, but often they're like, I don't want to do it. But we can kind of coach them so that they can do it, because it is important that our kids take ownership of their own academics and of the way that they interact with those teachers. And then even coaches who have a high standard, but maybe they whatever.
Kids felt like they're unfair. It's like, go talk to the coach.
Right.
Because I'm not going to talk to the coach unless you talk to the coach.
And after they did talk, then we may intervene. Like,
well, I would say if you talk to them and you as my child, if they won't listen to you, if they won't talk to you, or if you're not satisfied with that answer, come back to me and I'll help you. And we have had that happen. And I've gone with my kids sometimes to the coach and we've met with them together. Yeah. And we've been able to talk about some things like whenever there would be a problem. And that's giving that level of support. We've had kids who've had bosses who were great. We've had kids who had bosses at work who were really crappy. I never intervene with the boss because you know what? My kid always has an out. They can always quit.
That's right.
They can always quit. And I would say, hey, look, if you want to find another job, that's fine.
We support you and we're okay with that.
That's different than a teacher, right? You can't quit school. But with the boss, I never intervene. And we've heard of parents who intervene in their kid's job. I'm like, what are you, nuts? Like, you're crazy. Don't ever do that. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. If it's really a bad situation, your child should just quit, like. They should learn how to quit when they're under your roof and there's very few, they're not going to lose their house.
And that's okay too. There's a lesson in that, right? All of these are about growing in your kids' confidence and their ability. Because every child, they have certain gifts and talents, but everybody has a certain level of confidence. And what we're doing is we're adding not just our knowledge as their coach and support, we're also adding experience, which is real learning, them practicing this, right? That's what becomes out of that comes greatness. Out of that comes a deeper sense of resilience, that there are going to be adverse situations. And yes, that's going to come. And I know how to deal with it. Yeah. And I can talk about it. And I don't lose my control. I learn how to articulate myself. I learn not only the confidence, but I also learn, is it worth it? Is it not worth it? And are these situations worth sticking it out? And, again, whatever the scenario might be, so that I can have, as a child, I realize this is how I'm going to deal as an adult in the world. Yeah. And they're practicing, because everything we do as parents, what our kids do under our roof, is about them practicing to be adults, to be mature Christians, to be mature disciples, to be just adults who are free and are flourishing. And
when you're not there.
Yeah.
And I will even say, with the whole job situation, we have had daughters who have gotten inappropriately hit on by customers, by coworkers, being at work. And they would come, tell us about that. And I would ask them, I would say, look, do you feel unsafe? Would you say to that guy, hey, back off, or don't speak to me like that, or just ignore him? They're like, yeah, I think I can do that. I'm like, all right, well then just do that.
Right.
But also letting them know, if they don't stop, if you send the message that you want this guy to stop and he's not stopping, you need to talk to your boss, because that's inappropriate.
That's right.
And see, I want my daughters to have some kind of, not that I would put them in that situation, but them having that experience while I am here as a coach and I can give them that confidence, that I would rather have them have that now at 18 years old than having, God forbid, that experience when they're older and not having the confidence and not knowing what to do and dealing in a hostile work environment. Right. You want to send the message to your child, you can't handle this.
Right.
You can. You handle that with that guy, tell him to back off, either by body language or just saying it directly. And if he won't, then you go to the next level.
Because I want all of my daughters to be badass. I mean, come on. and my sons.
Done and done.
And because we do, our kids need that strength. They need that inner core that's going to flow out of them, that people are going to look at them and just say, I'm not messing with that.
Yeah,
I know there is something lacking. And I'll just make this mention. I've had friends who work at colleges who shared that the generation, and this is the last 10, 15 years, that they've seen a shift where parents are calling for their 20-year-old son. Why didn't they get, blah, blah, blah grade? And what? Time out. Your kid's in college. Your kid needs to have the strength and the will and the habits and the life that's going to allow them to say, I can figure this out. Now, we, of course, walk through, they've never done college before. And of course, we walk them through some of the basics. but they need to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. They need to have all these experiences, all these building blocks early on, so that when they are off, whether it is college, whether it's trades, whether it's whatever their life is beyond your home, that they step into it with a strength and a virtue and a resilience that only comes if over the previous eight or so years, particularly, they have learned slowly how to do things, how to get beyond the physical risks that are out there, as well as the emotional risks.
And sometimes, and I have to say, it is really hard to see your children struggle. Maybe it's with a friend. Maybe it's they didn't get picked on a team. Maybe they didn't get the part that they wanted.
Right.
I mean, that is really hard to see. And that's when we can come alongside them and just be like, you know what? It's okay.
Right.
It's really okay.
And so the last area is this idea of safety from ideas or ideologies or
right.
And I pushed back when Alicia wanted to include this, because at first I'm like, well, I want to protect them, blah, blah, we're Catholic. But the reality is that in all of these areas, there is, the truth is that we want to protect them, but we can't keep them naive.
Yeah.
And we don't want that. We want maturity, and maturity only comes through both having innocence protected young and the skills, the knowledge to deal with this and be resilient morally and intellectually.
You know what I just realized is that really the physical safety, that's like the younger kids, right?
Yeah.
It's just like 8 to 12. And then that emotional safety, that's like you like that's like your preteen up to like
10 to 12, 13.
Yeah, like older. This whole idea of like being safety from ideas,
really
we need to be aware of that. That's really like your upper teens, like maybe 14, 15 maybe and up. They really need to be exposed.
That helps me put this in context.
It's kind of like as they grow, these are more complex areas, but you cannot keep your 16, 17, 18-year-old naive or being in a place where they have never had their values be challenged. Right. And when I say challenged, I don't mean like somebody comes up and is like, why are you a Christian? I mean challenged by seeing suffering in the world and really getting a point of asking themselves, why is this happening? This isn't supposed to happen to good Catholic people. That challenges what you have taught them up to that point. Right. And it's something that they're going to have to work through. We'll give you some examples.
And again, just thinking of the big picture here, I love just to repeat back what you said, like that early part of physicality, which again, in some ways trickles throughout the rest of their life, but it really begins in that young stage where that emotional and goes through the kind of preteen up and really continues on probably into their teen years too. But thinking that you want to, as long as you can, protect your child in the younger years from harmful ideologies, right?
Absolutely.
And which is one of the reasons we don't have our kids on social media,
right.
Particularly when they're under the age of 16 and so forth, teenage. But I remember so distinctly, like even though I was trying to save our kids from all this garbage that was out there, in a good way, our priest gave a homily on abortion. Yeah. And I don't know if she was 8 years old or something like that.
9, 10 maybe. Yeah.
It was, what's abortion? And we hadn't broached that subject yet. And again, every child hears things differently and whatnot. And I wanted to protect her innocence. But I also knew there was, on a kid bite-sized level, and we won't go into that, but the ideologies that are in the world, they definitely, by the time they're in the upper teen years, have to be able to know how to wrestle with that. And if, again, while they're under your roof, you need to equip them, not just with an apologetic of why that ideology might be wrong, right, but the experience of individuals who may not be living the moral life as you would wish, that they come in contact with, or just the suffering and the pain and the struggle. They need to be able to articulate in their heart, in their mind, in their actions, what it looks like to live out with that I don't say contradiction is the wrong word, but it's, God has made this world good, yet it is still fallen.
Right. Yeah. And you have to be like, you can't be so afraid that your kids are going to go over to the dark side. You know, if they learn about, you know, gay rights or single moms or, you know, alternative lifestyles, like at a certain age, they're going to be exposed to these ideas, and you have to not be shocked, you know, by that, and be willing to explain to them and to help them to engage people who think differently than they do, to engage them with charity. We had a daughter who had a friend, and this friend's mom was a single mom, but had her boyfriend living, you know, with him. And I never allowed my daughter to sleep over their house.
Right.
And my daughter was always very annoyed with me about that.
Yeah.
But I just couldn't, because it's not safe.
That was not an environment that we were comfortable putting our daughter in.
Exactly. Because
at any point.
Yeah, at any point, because it's simply not safe. It's sexual abuse. That is exactly the environment of a lot of sexual abuse that happens within homes. And so, but for her, and she didn't completely understand, but as she got older and then into adulthood, she began to understand, oh, I see why you were protecting me from that. At the same time, we've had daughters who have had friends, you know, when our daughters were teenagers, had friends who got pregnant. Now, we would never say, well, you can't be friends with that person anymore. You can't be friends with that girl anymore, because this is an actual person. Were those situations challenging? Yes. Yes, that is a challenging situation. Do I wish that my daughter didn't have to be exposed to that or walk with her friend through that? Yes, absolutely. But you know what? Now that it's here, I'm like, okay, here we go. You know, like you're going to learn. This is somebody who made a mistake, or maybe doesn't have the same formation as you, or whatever. And we're going to teach you how to love them and how to recognize that. And for me as her mother, to not be afraid, but no, I'm not keeping my daughter safe. I'm making her strong.
That's right.
I'm making her strong, and I'm helping to interpret these things which are challenging her ideas. But my friend is such a good person. Yes, she is. And sometimes this happens. People make mistakes. People do things that are wrong.
And I'll say this first on the kind of personal level or the human level, and then on social media level. Like the idea that you wouldn't wish your child to be in a friend group where every single member was sleeping around, was taking drugs, was blah, 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 right? You wouldn't want that for your child.
Right.
And I think we have a whole podcast talking about friends and helping our kids develop good friendships, right? Because that is so crucial. But who they're surrounding themselves with matters. And so and early on, you control that environment. You control who's driving where. Mm-hmm. Don't be trapped to think, oh, I just have to do what everyone else is doing. Be selective, be thoughtful. We have chosen to invest our time in kids' relationships that we really wanted to see flourish. Mm-hmm. And hopefully you've trained them how to make good decisions so that you give them freedom when they're teenagers to make those good choices with friends.
Right.
And this is in contrast to social media, because what we have is we believe that there is no time in your life where peers are more influential than in your teen years.
Right.
Now, parents are still more influential than they probably realize, but that's
peers
why
are incredibly influential. Yes.
Which is why their friend group matters. So inject social media. Now we take that friend group and we times it by 1 million.
Yeah.
And they don't share your values. 100%.
Or you don't know. Yeah.
No, 100% can guarantee you that larger friend group doesn't.
Right.
That doesn't mean that Mom, I don't agree with that. They're getting bombarded with messages on social media all day long. It's coming up in their feed. There is no way parents can keep up with that. So when we talk about risks and safety-ism, we talked now about these 3 big areas. But where you do need to protect your kids, and again, we're not going to do this entirely in this show, we're wrapping up here, but this is where you do need to protect your kids, because it's not fair to put your kids.
It's too much.
It's too much for them to handle, even as a 16-year-old, in my opinion, to go against a crowd of hundreds that they might be the only one.
Right.
And then you've got an algorithm on top of these hundreds and thousands of people that might be following or the feed that they're in. Mm-hmm. And then you have an algorithm and a tech company that's trying to bait them into
what we want is that we want the opposite of that. We want them to have their friends, majority people that share their values.
That's right.
And so they have that support, and then they come in contact with one situation that may challenge their worldview, and then they are stronger to be able to deal with it. Right. You see, as opposed to the flip side, which is being on social media, having all friends who don't share your values, then that is a lot more difficult. But good Catholic parents cannot be so afraid of our children's values being challenged that you never allow them to get a job in a place where they're going to come in contact with strangers, that you never allow them as an adult, maybe as an 18-year-old, maybe to even go on social media then. Like you have to make your children strong and grounded, and then know that, you know what? I trust you that if you're going to come in contact with, maybe it's a gay relative or a gay friend, it's like, okay, yeah, some people are different, and this is what we're going to do. We're going to love them, and we're going to accept them, and don't be afraid that they're just going to get sucked over to the dark side. Now, if every one of their true friends are caught up into that lifestyle, that's a problem.
Yes.
That's not what we're saying. We're saying having good support, but coming into exposure to those ideas, that is appropriate.
And I think what you just said there about the right level of support, because early on, that comes from us and their family and maybe a small little friend group, but that continues to grow.
Right.
And it must grow, and you must give your kids the ability to choose wisely, prudently, that good support group, the knowledge, the skills, the virtue, and the support that they need to enter into that next level, because that's going to be with them for the rest of their life. They need...
you always need support.
You always need that, right? And and from that, you have the strength to step out. And every phase of development requires another level of support and strengthening for that. Because again, we want to raise kids who are resilient, strong, confident disciples of Jesus Christ, who look at the world and see this as our home, but not our permanent home, who look at the challenges, the risks. Like one of the things that we encourage all our kids to do is to go on mission. And I think that one of the reasons we encourage them to do that is because we want them to see that there is pain, there is suffering in this world, and that they can do something about it.
And they did that when they were over 16.
Yeah.
16, 17, 18. Not necessarily college, but even in high school.
And when they have that experience, when they can go out into the world and they are confronted with
pain and suffering and deprivation and
the
immorality.
Evils of the world. Not that people are evil, but the evils, if you will, of the world.
Sure.
The things that aren't perfect and pristine
exactly.
and manicured. But then they can see, I can contribute some good to this.
Right.
You're giving them that strength so that they see this world as a way that they can grow. The way because again, if we go back to the very discovery mode, we want our kids to be looking out at the world saying, I can picture myself freely engaging in this world and not getting caught up in the values, in the secular ideologies, in the trend of my group. I know where my belonging is. I know who I am. I know whose I am, and that I can engage out there, because safety-ism creates this bubble mentality that doesn't actually give them long-term strength. We want them to develop their own armor and their own inner strength so that they can go out, because we want them to enter the battle rightly and appropriately.
And just as like when they're infants, we as parents help them to regulate their emotions, and then that gradually becomes them regulating their emotions. Well, that firm base of support and attachment for even handling the difficult things in life, yes, it's us at the beginning, but eventually they need to have either their own inner strength, but also be able to form their own friend group of support.
That's right.
It's because when they go out into the world, they're not going to be living in your home. They're going to need their friends and other people around them, and ultimately the Lord, to give them that knowledge of, this is who I am. I can do this. I can have confidence in the life of God within me and the grace that is within me.
And if you look at that analogy of the carpenter versus the gardener, we're called to be the gardener. While they're under your roof, they're in some ways, or particularly when they're young, they're in the greenhouse.
Yeah.
But the whole point isn't to stay in the greenhouse. It's to go out and be planted somewhere on their own, independent. And so we've got to realize that that's the transition that we're making as a good gardener.
Okay. I think that everybody should just read the show notes for the key takeaways and a couple discussions, because we've gone way over. But
I know.
this was so important.
I think this was important, and I think it was a good topic. So if you've enjoyed today's episode, please like and share it with a friend.
Yeah.
This is an important topic. Hopefully we've challenged you. If we said anything that upsets you, let us know.
Yeah.
Or if you disagree with and you're troubled by, send us an
And you
email.
know what? Actually, one thing too that I want to ask is that if you like this podcast, could you go on Apple Podcasts and give us a review? Because we're trying to up our reviews. So as those increase, more people will be able to find us. So if you can go take 2 seconds, go do a quick review, that would be just really, really helpful to us. Maybe we should put a button or something in here to make it easy for people to do. But that would be great if you could do that. Thank you so much. And do you want to say a prayer to end this? Okay.
That's right. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen. God, you have created us as parents to be gardeners, to be invested in the messiness of family life. Give us confidence in our ability to lead in the home and to give out freedom and allow our kids the appropriate level of risk, and not get so caught up with physical safety that we forget about all the other important things that we need our kids to grow in their resilience and their strength. Lord, help us be strong together so that our kids can be developed into mature, wise, faithful disciples as adults. And in your name we pray.
Amen.
Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen. And until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you.
Family, we're taking a chance.